In the heart of winter, the world does not forgive. The wind howled like a pack of wolves through the jagged ridges of the Rocky Mountains, rattling the loose shutters of the isolated cabin perched on the cliffside. Snow whipped against the weathered wood, thick and relentless, burying the world in white silence. Few dared venture into such cold. Fewer still returned. But Marcus Callahan, a rugged mountain man with hands like iron and eyes the color of storm clouds, had long embraced solitude. He had lived alone for nearly a decade, his only companions the trees and the river that cut through the valley below. His face bore the stories of life hardened by grief. Scars crisscrossed his knuckles from years of chopping wood, and a thin line etched near his jaw hinted at a past argument with fate itself. Villagers whispered about him in town, callous whispers that painted him as a hermit, a man touched by sorrow too deep to share. Marcus never answered them, for he had made peace with the echo of his own solitude. But that evening, something shattered the icy rhythm of his life. Through the blizzard, Marcus saw movement, a faint shadow weaving through the snowdrifts. His breath caught. It was too large to be an animal. The shadow stumbled, then collapsed. Curiosity and something softer buried in his chest forced him forward. Through the storm, he found them. 7 children huddled in the snow, their clothes torn and filthy, faces pale from hunger and frostbite. Some were no older than 3, the oldest barely 12. They clawed at scraps of spoiled bread and wilted vegetables, eyes wide with a desperation that made Marcus' chest ache. Hunger, cold, and neglect had painted them thin, yet their spirits were unbroken, clinging to life like fragile moths to a flickering flame. Marcus knelt beside them. "Children, what are you doing out here?" His voice was rough, but it carried a warmth that pierced the storm. They looked at him with a mixture of fear and disbelief, instinctively shrinking back, as if expecting the world to punish them for daring to live. One boy, the eldest, whispered, "Please, don't take us." His voice cracked, warned by the cruelty of a world that had long since forgotten them. Marcus' heart, long encased in solitude, thudded painfully. He had seen suffering before, but never like this, not raw, unguarded, and desperate. His mind raced. Who could have abandoned these innocents in such merciless weather? The memory of his own loss, the children he had failed to protect in his past, surged like a torrent through him. He stood, pulling his thick coat tighter, the snow clinging to his rugged shoulders. "You're coming with me. Now." One by one, he lifted the trembling children, cradling them against his chest and wrapping them in the warmth of his coat. The blizzard seemed to hiss in protest, but Marcus didn't falter. Each step toward his cabin was a battle, the wind slapping against his face, yet he felt a strange resolve. These children, lost, forgotten, abandoned, were a chance at redemption. Perhaps for him, too. By the time they reached the cabin, frost clung to their hair and eyelashes, and small whimpers echoed in the small wooden space. Marcus stoked the fire until it roared, the warmth casting flickering shadows across the room. The children clustered together, shivering, clinging to the rough blankets he threw over them. Then came a knock on the door. Marcus' brow furrowed. Through the storm, an old woman, hunched yet unbroken, emerged. Her hands bore the marks of decades of labor, her eyes soft with the wisdom of age. "I smelled smoke," she said, voice like gravel warmed by sunlight. "And children." Marcus nodded. "Found them in the blizzard, starving." She smiled faintly, bringing with her a bundle of preserved meats, fresh bread, and a small kettle of hot stew. Her presence was like a balm, soothing the tense room. As the children ate, their tiny hands trembling over the warm food, she began to tell stories, tales of heroes, of impossible journeys, of hope even in the darkest winters. And Marcus, for the first time in years, felt a quiet stir of belonging in the shared warmth, the fragile laughter of children filling the empty corners of his cabin. Outside, the world remained cruel and unforgiving. The blizzard raged on. But inside, the mountain man and his unexpected wards began to weave the fragile threads of trust. Little did they know, the blizzard had only revealed the surface of the darkness they were about to escape, and the light Marcus and the old woman would guide them toward The next morning, the blizzard had softened to a bitter drizzle. Marcus awoke to muffled cries coming from the cabin's corner. 7 children huddled together, still wrapped in blankets, their eyes wide, haunted. Over breakfast, the old woman, whom the children called Granny May, began gently coaxing out their stories. At first, the words came in fits, stammers, lies of omission, silence. But as the warmth of the cabin seeped into their bones, their tales emerged. 3-year-old Lily had been left in a wagon outside the town mill, the adults too busy with their own survival to notice her cries. 10-year-old Sam had watched his family vanish into debt and disease, leaving him to scavenge for scraps. The others, Anna, Noah, Elsie, Jonah, and little Ben, each carried shadows of cruelty, abusive guardians, hunger that gnawed at the marrow, nights spent in freezing barns or beneath abandoned porches. Marcus listened in silence, his eyes stormy. He had known loss before. His own wife taken by illness, his child swept away by fever. But hearing these young voices recount abandonment in the hands of a cruel world cut deeper than any wound he bore, he felt rage rise, the kind that makes a man want to rebuild the world with his fists. But Granny May placed a frail hand on his shoulder. "They need warmth, Marcus, not anger," she whispered. "Anger doesn't fill a belly or soothe a frightened heart." So he set to work. He repaired the firewood pile, hung thick blankets over the drafts in the cabin, and even patched a few of the children's rags as best he could. Meanwhile, Granny May whispered stories that made the children giggle or gasp. Tales of brave settlers who refused to give up, of secret treasure hidden in the hills, and of a golden sun that always rose after the storm. By evening, the cabin had transformed. The smell of hot stew filled the air. The children's laughter, soft but genuine, echoed in the small rooms, and Marcus felt something he hadn't known in years: purpose. These lost souls, huddled against the cold and cruelty of the world, were his responsibility, and he would not fail them. Yet the world beyond the cabin remained merciless. Villagers from the nearby settlement whispered of the mountain man hoarding children, of strange noises heard late at night, and of a house that had become an anomaly in the wilderness. Some feared him. Others envied the warmth that now emanated from his humble home. Marcus ignored them. For the first time, his life's mission was not survival, it was salvation. As night fell, the children slept in small clusters, warmed by blankets and the fire. Marcus and Granny May sat silently by the hearth, sharing a rare moment of stillness. "You're their angel," she said softly. "But remember, Marcus, angels aren't always safe. Sometimes they burn for the souls they save." He didn't answer. He stared into the flames, thinking of the years he had spent alone, of the mountain that had been his only witness. Perhaps now his heart would burn, but it would be for something greater than grief. And beyond the walls of the cabin, the first faint rays of hope began to pierce the storm-laden sky. Days bled into weeks, and the harshness of winter persisted. Marcus began teaching the children survival skills: how to find water under frozen earth, how to safely chop wood, and how to keep warm in the merciless cold. Each lesson was both practical and symbolic. He was preparing them for the world that had cast them aside, and teaching them that resilience was their shield against cruelty. But the mountain man and Granny May soon discovered that survival alone could not heal the scars etched into the children's souls. Nightmares haunted their sleep, memories of cruel neighbors, lost parents, and starvation. One evening, as Marcus stoked the fire, little Ben trembled violently in his sleep. Lily's cries pierced the cabin as she awoke from a nightmare of being left in the snow. Granny May knelt beside them, her voice calm but resolute. "The past is a shadow, children. It can touch you, but it cannot own you. You are stronger than it thinks you are." Marcus, too, opened his heart slowly. He shared fragments of his own past. The sickness that took his family, the bitter isolation of mountain life, and the moments when he had questioned the purpose of existence. By laying bare his own wounds, he taught the children that suffering could be endured and overcome. Despite the harsh world outside, Marcus' cabin became a sanctuary. He carved small toys from scrap wood, patched clothing with whatever fabric he could scavenge, and shared meals with a generosity born of empathy. The children, initially wary, began to respond. Sam offered to help chop wood. Anna swept the floor. Elsie and Jonah tended the fire. Together, they wove a fragile tapestry of family, each thread a promise of survival and care. Yet rumors of the mountain man's deeds spread through the village, some tainted with malice. Cruel whispers painted him as a man meddling with the natural order, and a few parents even forbade their children from speaking to the lost children. Marcus ignored them. But the pain of societal judgment lingered, a reminder of the world they could not yet escape. Through it all, Granny May remained a constant light. She recounted stories of kindness and bravery, of settlers who faced impossible odds, and of families who rebuilt lives from ashes. Her tales were bridges across the chasm of despair, and slowly the children began to dream again, not of escape, but of life. Marcus realized then that redemption was not only theirs, it was his too. In saving these children, he saved himself from the frozen prison of solitude, replacing bitterness with purpose and grief with love. Winter had begun to retreat, leaving behind a landscape streaked with frozen mud and the first brave buds of spring. Yet the chill in the air carried whispers. Villagers spoke of the mountain man and the children as though they were a curse, a wild aberration to be feared. Marcus sensed it long before the first knocks came. He noticed unfamiliar tracks around the cabin, boots caked in mud, eyes peering from behind the trees. The children, once shy, huddled closer to him, sensing the tension in the air. Granny May, ever perceptive, warned softly, "The world outside is cruel, Marcus. They'll test you, and they may try to take the children. Hold firm." It happened one evening. A trio of men from the village, voices hushed but full of menace, appeared at the cabin's door. "Heard you've taken in some lost ones," the tallest said, eyes scanning the children as if weighing their value. "You can't keep them here. They belong with families, with the town." Marcus stepped forward, imposing and unyielding. His long coat dusted with snow, his calloused hands resting on the carved hilt of his hunting knife, he met their gaze with steel. "These children are safe here. That's all that matters." The men scoffed. "Safe? You? They've been abandoned by the world for a reason. You're meddling." Sam, emboldened by Marcus' protection, spoke up. "We've got food, a fire, and someone who cares for us. We're not leaving." A tense silence followed, broken only by the crackling of the hearth. Granny May moved to the side, letting the mountain man handle the confrontation. Her presence, steady and unwavering, lent authority to the room. Marcus' voice was low but deadly calm. "If you come back here, it won't be pleasant. These children are under my care, and I've fought harsher men than you in harsher storms. Leave now." The village men exchanged uneasy glances, sensing a resolve they could not break. With grumbles and muttered curses, they retreated, leaving the snow-strewn yard behind. But Marcus knew the whispers would persist, that the town's cruelty had merely shifted into shadows. That night, as the children slept, he walked the perimeter of his small plot, eyes scanning the hills for threats. He thought of the lives these young souls had endured. Nights in barns, cold porches, wagons, and alleyways, hunger gnawing at their bellies like a persistent rat, adults too busy, too cruel, or too indifferent to notice their suffering. Granny May followed him silently. "You've given them something they've never known," she said. "A home, a heart that fights for them. That's worth more than any whisper or scorn." Marcus nodded, though the weight of responsibility pressed against his shoulders. He realized that saving them from the storm had been only the first step, protecting them from the cruelty of people, the shadows in their past, and the bitterness of the world. That would be the true battle. Days passed, and the cabin grew warmer in more ways than one. Marcus and Granny May continued to teach the children not only survival skills, but also the unspoken art of hope. They braided hair, stitched clothes, carved toys, and even planted a small garden behind the cabin, stubborn sprouts fighting through the frozen soil, as if to mirror their own resilience. Jonah, the quietest of the children, marveled at the tender vegetables. "Will these grow into real food?" he asked. Granny May smiled, brushing a stray lock of hair from his forehead. "Everything worth having takes patience, Jonah." Life is the same way. And Marcus, watching the children laugh as they played in the muddy yard, felt a strange lightness in his chest. For the first time in years, he imagined a future filled not with loneliness but with shared warmth, with the chaos and joy of a house alive with children's voices. Yet the past always lingered, like snow that refuses to melt entirely. One by one, the children began recounting stories of the adults who had failed them. The words were sharp like splintered wood. Their pain was raw, but in telling it, they reclaimed fragments of themselves. Marcus listened, each tale a reminder of why he could not allow the shadows of cruelty to touch them again. By the time spring light finally crept through the frost-lined windows, the cabin was no longer a refuge from a storm, but a fortress of hope. Outside, the village's whispers persisted, but inside, Marcus had woven a family from fragments of lost lives. Summer arrived with a gentle warmth, softening the rugged edges of the mountains and turning the cabin's yard into a patchwork of green and gold. The children, now clean and clothed in patched but sturdy garments, ran through the fields, their laughter ringing like bells across the valley. Marcus leaned against the doorway, watching them, a rare smile breaking through the stubble of his weathered face. Lily chased after Ben, Sam and Jonah sparred playfully with sticks, and Anna and Elsie tended the tiny garden, proud of their first harvest. Even Granny May, usually reserved, joined in with gentle teasing, sharing ice-cold lemonade from a worn pitcher. The harsh whispers of the village had faded, replaced by curiosity and, slowly, admiration. Word spread of a mountain man who had rescued 7 forgotten children, fed them, and nurtured their spirits. Some villagers came, cautiously at first, offering supplies or asking advice, and Marcus welcomed them, teaching them that kindness was stronger than suspicion. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the mountains, painting the sky in molten gold and crimson, the children gathered around the fire outside the cabin. Marcus and Granny May joined them, and for the first time, the mountain man felt a profound sense of completion. He looked at their eager faces, glowing in the firelight, and knew that the darkness they had endured would never define them. Granny May began a story, her voice weaving magic into the evening air. There once was a man who lived atop a mountain alone and weary. One day, he found 7 lost souls shivering in the storm. They had nothing, and yet he gave them everything: his warmth, his heart, and his home. The children listened, rapt, as the story mirrored their own journey. Marcus' eyes glistened, and for a brief moment, the mountain's cold shadows felt miles away. As the stars emerged, the cabin stood surrounded by laughter, light, and love. Marcus realized that life's cruel winter had given way to a spring of belonging. These children, once abandoned and broken, were now a family, their hearts knit together by resilience, hope, and the quiet heroism of a man who had chosen compassion over solitude. In the small town, whispers shifted from suspicion to wonder. The mountain man was no longer a hermit. He was a guardian, a father figure, a man whose heart had defied the storm and the cruelty of the world. And within the cabin walls, 7 children slept safely, dreaming of the bright tomorrows that awaited them as the mountain man, once alone, finally found his own redemption in the symphony of their laughter. The world beyond the mountains remained harsh, but inside, love and courage had planted roots strong enough to withstand any storm. And so, a lonely mountain man had become an angel, a beacon of hope, and a creator of joy, proving that even in the coldest, most unforgiving places, warmth could prevail.